morning, Europe. Welcome to the program. Our top stories for you this hour. Zimbabwe's new start. Emmerson Mnangagwa is elected president after 4 decades of Robert Mugabe. Can he turn things around? Mercury rising as Europe bakes in the scorching heat. Temperatures set to break all-time records. Make or break, the UK's Theresa May prepares for Brexit crunch talks with France's Emmanuel Macron with the tough task of winning him over. Plus, over in the Cube, our social media news desk.
Enemy of the people. Donald Trump's war of words with the media continues as UN experts warn it could have violent consequences.
And do you own an iPhone? Well, if so, you've helped Apple hit $1 trillion in market value, the first US company to do so. Thank you for starting your morning with us. Now, our top story. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has won Zimbabwe's election after days of delay. The main opposition party, the MDC, said that it totally rejected the vote, saying they were unable to verify it. The win gave incumbent President Emmerson Mnangagwa a slim lead over the MDC's Nelson Chamisa. Now, violent clashes on the streets of Harare between the army and the opposition supporters on Wednesday have marred what was widely seen as a potential turning point in post-Robert Mugabe politics. Euronews' Katie Dartford has a story.
Supporters of President Emmerson Mnangagwa celebrating the victory of a man known as the Crocodile for his political shrewdness.
Mnangagwa Emmerson Dambudzo of ZANU-PF party is therefore duly declared elected president of the Republic of Zimbabwe.
Shortly after the announcement, Mnangagwa took to Twitter to thank Zimbabweans and hailed a new beginning. The win for the former spy chief will see the ruling party ZANU-PF maintain control of the government in the first vote since the fall of longtime leader Robert Mugabe last November. Mnangagwa received just over 50% of the vote, whilst main opposition challenger Nelson Chamisa received 44%. Earlier on Thursday, Chamisa claimed victory before the official announcement. Minutes before Mnangagwa was declared the winner, the Movement for Democratic Change said the party rejected the results and would challenge them in the courts.
The results that have been announced have not been verified by us. I did not sign those results, so the results are fake.
A comment which had Morgan Kamichi promptly removed by police from the stage in Harare. Although ZANU-PF won by a landslide, its majority has shrunk since the 2013 election when it obtained 160 seats and the MDC just 49. While the election day was peaceful, the poll was marred by the deaths of 6 people in a military crackdown on Wednesday against protesters alleging vote rigging. In response, police raided the headquarters of opposition leaders, accusing them of inciting violence. Throughout the day, the army patrolled the streets of Harare, a stark reminder for many Zimbabweans of the decades of military-backed repression under Mugabe. Katie Dartford for Euronews.
And joining us live from Harare is journalist from Euronews' sister channel African News, Pindai Dube. Pindai, thanks for joining us on the program. So now, how is Mnangagwa going to govern now, considering how divisive the election campaign was and the violence that we just saw in the last couple of days?
Thank you. It's going to be very difficult for Mnangagwa to rule. This has become a divided nation because, Mnangagwa has been in power for the past 7 months, but he has failed to fix the economy. If you look, there are still bank queues, unemployment is still 90%, and most people are sleeping in banks to get cash, even the pensioners. So it's going to be very difficult. You remember, in 2008, they finally had to make what we call a government of national unity. That's what, when I spoke to other political analysts, that's what they told me, that that's the best solution for the country to go forward. So we are yet to see. There is tension in the country. The opposition are threatening. You remember they stormed the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission room where results were being announced. So there's just tension in the country.
Yeah, so you're talking about the tension. Do we expect to see more unrest here, just post-election unrest?
Yes, I spoke to some opposition leaders last night, and they said this time they won't let it go. They believe elections have been rigged since 2008 when Morgan Tsvangirai, the late opposition leader, was alive. And they said this time they won't let it go. They will continue calling for protest, and they will continue making sure that it's difficult for Mnangagwa to rule.
Yeah, and Pindai, just very quickly, because we don't have much time, I want to know, how different do you think Mnangagwa is going to be from Mugabe?
Yeah, Mnangagwa is different in terms of, yes, he has made some difference because there's little freedom of expression in the country. You can talk, you can criticize an opposition party, you can criticize any party, and you can criticize him. Unlike during Mugabe's time, people were being trashed, arrested for criticizing the sitting government, and also police have been removed in the highway. Remember, police were everywhere, every corner during Mugabe's time, arresting and harassing motorists, people. So that's the difference.
So indeed, we will be watching this closely, how Mnangagwa is going to be ruling Zimbabwe. Now, thank you for that. Pindai Dube, journalist from our sister channel, African News. Thanks. Well, after the results of 10 provinces were announced in Zimbabwe, people started going on social media, sharing their opinions and their thoughts. Alex has this part of the story.
Here on Your News, Tessa, we bring you all views from all sides. And so today it's important to understand what ordinary people in Zimbabwe and from Zimbabwe are saying about these results. And a lot of that reaction is coming from what the politicians have been saying about the results. So let's just first of all show you what the president tweeted. President Mnangagwa saying he was humbled to be elected for a second time. But a key phrase here, that although there was division for Zimbabweans at the polls, we are united in our dreams. And that's certainly a sense we've got looking over a lot of posts on social media. People in Zimbabwe are united in this desire to make things better, to improve the situation, even if there is that division when it comes to the ballot box about exactly how that is achieved. Let's just bring up somebody replying directly to the president, a supporter of Mnangagwa, saying, "I voted for you," but then also making it very clear the reality of their life. I need cash. I need a job. I need an environment where I will be allowed to work my dreams and aspirations into fruition. The sense here that, yes, we've got these dreams to work towards, but put the situation in place so that we can do it. Other people posting critical things of the new president, including this user here saying 5 more years of rates, no water, bad shedding, basically saying low-paying jobs, and the situation will not improve under Mnangagwa's new government. So some people there seeing this as a missed or a wasted opportunity. Other people more neutral, saying, I don't really feel one way or the other, but I do feel there is a problem, to quote here, in our motherland, a problem with the democracy in Zimbabwe. Obviously, this is the first election since Mugabe was removed. But then I think what's really interesting to note is that there were the army positioned on the streets yesterday. As it was expected, these results would be controversial, and a number of people were killed previously when the army fired onto protesters. So a lot of criticism about the aftermath of this election. But let's just bring you up a perspective from Dexter here on Twitter, which I think is a really interesting one, saying, at 30, is it too late to sell everything and move to Europe? He's saying here that Europe seems to have democracy down. They've given it to us. We've got it here, but we don't seem to be able to do it. Now, obviously, that's a controversial view, other people disagreeing with that. But a lawyer, UK-based Zimbabwean lawyer, someone who is from Zimbabwe, has moved to Europe, basically saying there needs to be a clinical look at exactly how this election was conducted, how the results came in, to make sure that people in Zimbabwe don't feel they need to up sticks and leave, that they have a working democracy. So we'll bring you all voices from all sides on this story as it continues, the fallout from this election.
All right, thanks for that, Alex and Q team. From the Norwegian Arctic Circle to the beaches of the Iberian Peninsula, well, Europe is sweltering. This summer has been marked by wildfires, droughts, and record-breaking temperatures. And now forecasters are saying that Europe's all-time temperature record could be broken this weekend. The current European record is 48 degrees Celsius, set in Athens in July 1977. And in some areas of Spain and Portugal today, temperatures are set to top out at 47 degrees. Now, hot air sweeping in from Africa is prompting health warnings about Sahara desert dust and is driving up the exceptionally high temperatures in some southern areas of the Iberian Peninsula. Well, braving the torrid weather in Lisbon, to join us live is Your News journalist Marco Lemos. Marco, Portugal is no stranger to hot weather, but how disruptive has this particular heat wave been?
Today, we are expecting temperatures over 40 degrees, and for the next couple of days to beat record high temperatures in Portugal. I recall you that 15 years ago we had in southeast of where I am temperature of 47.4 degrees, and this time we are expecting in some places, notably Beja in the south of Portugal, in Alentejo, to reach 48 degrees today and tomorrow, maybe more. To tell you, just to give you an example, when I woke up this morning, I found my kids sleeping on the terrace. So what? It was already. This happens after July that was kind of mild, with temperatures not over 20 degrees, even some rains. All the public services are on maximum alert, also due to the fires. For the moment, as is usual in the morning, there's just a soft breeze on the air. But on the up interior north of the country, it's expected to have, there's an alert of dry thunderstorms for today, which increases the risk of fires. Just to tell you also that public servants have been released from their work, the ones that are firefighters, so to be in prevention for any emergency.
Yeah, Marco, you're talking about those the public services. The changes that they did now because of the heat wave, is it different from what it normally is in summer? So did they put extra services or alerts because of this heat wave?
It's all of the territory is on red alert, the maximum level of alert due to the fire. Also, authorities are worried with, especially with old people and people with respiratory problems, due not only to the heat, but also with a cloud coming from south, from the Sahara, filled with dust, a phenomenon that happens from time to time here in Portugal, but can be very problematic especially for old people and for people with respiratory problems. The advices are all the same. Drink a lot of water, don't be in the sun in between the hours of 11 to 5 p.m. Try to stay on the shade, but especially drink a lot of water, not alcohol, and not drinks with sugar. This is an advice that has been repeated by authorities in the past few days.
Yeah, and I can just about see swimming pools in the background, so I suppose that will come in handy. Thank you for that, Marco Lemos, a journalist there in Lisbon. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, do stay with us for more on how this feverish heat wave is also creating unprecedented events in Europe's northernmost reaches. We will be speaking to the woman who discovered that this mountain right here, it lost so much ice that it is no longer Sweden's highest point. And still to come for you on the program, May's Brexit crunch talks with Macron. Well, the British Prime Minister breaks into her holiday today to try and win over the French president. And airstrikes in Yemen. At least 26 people have been killed during airstrikes in the port city of Hodeidah. We'll hear the latest from Yemen just after the break. Your top story on Good Morning Europe, Zimbabwe's new start. Emmerson Mnangagwa is elected president after 4 decades of rule by Robert Mugabe. Now, British Prime Minister Theresa May is holding crunch Brexit talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and joining the French leader in his summer residence on the French Riviera. Prime Minister May has cut her own holidays short in a bid to gain support for her Brexit strategy. And it comes amid a summer of diplomatic deployments for May as she targets individual European leaders to get on board with her plans. But with the crucial EU summit less than 3 months away, Macron has said that he won't allow May to bypass the EU's chief negotiator. Now, Vincent Macavini is joining us live. Now, Vincent, can you tell us, please, how important are these talks today?
Good morning, Tessa from Downing Street. Well, as you mentioned, the Prime Minister cutting her own holiday short in Lake Garda to travel to Fort-de-Brennesson to meet with the French President as part of her wider strategy to build support for her embattled Chequers plan. Now, President Macron is one of the toughest critics of this plan behind the scenes, so she's going to try to soften him on this position. She'll be trying to say the political reality is if that you don't accept this plan, you might be dealing with someone tougher in a few months' time as Prime Minister, possibly Boris Johnson, still the bookies' favourite. So Theresa May is making this trip around Europe. She's already met with Chancellor Merkel, she's met with Austrian Chancellor Kurz, and she's trying to go over the heads of the EU Commission to try to avoid this no-deal scenario. The Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, was also on his first trip this week. He was in France on Tuesday saying that the no-deal situation wouldn't just be bad for the UK, it would be bad for all the other 27 EU member states. So Theresa May is hoping that this kind of direct approach will work on the other European leaders. We can expect a few more of them to have her and husband Philip dropping in, whether they want them or not. And we won't really know how successful this mission has been until she comes back here to Westminster in the autumn and presents her What I Did on My Summer Holidays report, because she wants to be able to turn around to her MPs who are still fractious on her plans and say, well, I've got the support of this many European leaders, this is the only plan that works, and you need to put the country above your own party interests.
All right, thank you for that, Vincent McAvenny there in London. And for the European perspective, let's cross live to European affairs journalist Stéphane de Vries now, who is talking to us from southern France. Stéphane, what is Macron and Europe's stand on this?
Well, Europe's stance and also Macron's stance is very simple. I think Macron will give her a very simple message today. He will say, well, it's very nice to have you here at my summer residence, but please know that Michel Barnier is the only one who's in charge of negotiating the terms of the Brexit and our relationship with the United Kingdom after Brexit next year. Now, of course, Theresa May is taking a gamble. She may hope that the extreme heat in southern Europe may make Macron a little bit more, well, give in to the proposals she made in her white paper last month. But the Élysée, the presidential palace, yesterday already insisted upon the fact that the meeting between the two leaders today will not change anything. So it's a gamble. Theresa May and her husband, Philip, have been invited tonight for a private dinner with the Macron couple. It is not known what's on the menu yet, but one thing is clear: when dessert arrives, Theresa May can't have her cake and eat it.
Oh, thank you for that. Stéphane de Vries there, European affairs journalist. Thanks. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, a $1 trillion business. A historic first as Apple became the first public U.S. company to be valued at $1 trillion. We'll look at how it got there. And over in the queue.
The war of words between President Donald Trump and the media continues. We'll have the latest for you, including the warning it could turn violent. But first, a short break.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back to the program. Now, an historical first yesterday as Apple, maker of MacBooks and the iPhone, of course, became the first public U.S. company to be valued at $1 trillion. NBC's Jolene Kent takes a look at its path to the history books.
It's the company that promised to change the world. Today, it's iPhones and other products the center of life on the go. Now, Apple making history as the world's first $1 trillion company.
It just solidifies the fact that this is a company that's been hitting all cylinders for a very long time and continues to do so.
It's been a remarkable turnaround from 22 years ago when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Then founder Steve Jobs returned to fix the company he created.
And the question is, where is Apple relevant?
And it paid off. A $1,000 investment in the company back then worth about $450,000 today. Apple is now led by CEO Tim Cook, who talked to Lester in November.
You may soon be head of $1 trillion company. When you think about that, what goes through your mind?
Well, the truth is, I don't think about it, to be really honest. What I view a stock price to be a result of doing other things well.
But potential new tariffs on China, where most of Apple's products are made, could now give Apple and Cook a significant challenge.
That was NBC's Jolene Kent reporting there. And to help us get our head around just how large $1 trillion is and what lies next for Apple, Dan Strum, technology reporter for the Wall Street Journal, joins us now from Hong Kong. Dan, so we're saying that this is the first public U.S. company to be worth $1 trillion. But how big of a deal is this? Are there other precedents?
Well, not really. I mean, if you think globally, it's not the first company to arrive at $1 trillion valuation. There's a company in China called PetroChina, which is a state-owned oil company that, by some measures, has hit that metric before. Of course, it's state-owned, so not really the same thing. Saudi Aramco was set to go public, at least until not too long ago. Saudi Arabia's biggest oil company was valued at over $2 trillion by some measure. Never quite got to that IPO. So it's a pretty unique position for Apple to be in.
All right, if you look at some of the biggest tech companies, how would we compare Apple to the likes of Amazon and Facebook? And what does this mean for the tech industry in general, tech companies?
Well, for sure, Apple has hit this milestone first, but there are other tech companies that are hot on its heels if you're thinking about valuation alone. So Amazon is at about $900 billion in valuation, probably pretty likely to meet that $1 trillion mark as well. You've got Microsoft as well, close at the heels. Not every tech company is seeing the success that Apple has, though. Just last week, we saw Facebook, of course, one of the high flyers in the U.S. tech sector for a long time. About 20% of its stock value was wiped out in a day, looking at about $130 billion just vanished. So these tech companies in the U.S. have been really high flyers for a long time, but they are not immune to the market forces out there and to the scrutiny of the market.
All right, thank you for that. Dan Strom, technology reporter for the Wall Street Journal, talking to us there from Hong Kong. Thanks. Now, let's move to the Middle East. At least 28 people have been killed during airstrikes in the port city of Hodeidah in Yemen. The Yemeni medical officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that the Saudi-led coalition fighting Yemen's Shiite rebels conducted airstrikes on the rebel-held city yesterday, which also led to an estimated 70 people being injured. Well, the coalition has denied responsibility and blamed the attacks on the Houthi rebels. The airstrikes took place close to the city's main public hospital, Al Thawra, and near a popular fish market. The wounded, who were mainly civilians, were taken to hospital. Now, the United Nations plan to invite all sides to Geneva for fresh talks in September. And we're joined now on the phone by Dr. Mariam Aldogan, the field manager for Save the Children in Hodeidah. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Are you able to give us an update on the fatalities and injuries from the airstrikes?
Good morning. Yes, since yesterday we hear a lot of the sound of the airplane and the injured and killed people. They are continue, but we don't know exactly where from. But what happened yesterday is really unacceptable that this is the first referral hospital in Hodeidah Governorate, and the catchment population before this hospital more than 500,000, and it supports more than 5 other governorates. Some of our team was there, and suddenly just calling us because the children supporting diphtheria treatment center there, and this team they are calling us to say there is an attack. And a lot of people died and injured people that are scattered in the street. And after that, there is another attack. We don't know.
Yeah, Dr. Mariam Aldogan, apologies. Unfortunately, the audio is not that great, but thank you for talking to us. Field Manager for Save the Children in Hodeidah, Dr. Mariam Aldogan. And coming up for you, we'll have more on your top stories, including that Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo just days after it was declared over. We'll talk to a doctor who was at the front line. Plus, is the media the enemy of the people? Well, we'll look at the growing row between the White House and the press. Plus, we'll be in Iraq to look at one clinic who's trying to make life a little better for people who are permanently disabled from decades of conflict. But first, let's look at today's no comment from the United States, where wildfires are still raging in California and Oregon.
One thing about it, Terry, I mean, it's just... a little bit.
On her property?
Yeah, I don't know.
The watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story: Zimbabwe's new start. Emmerson Mnangagwa is elected president after 4 decades of Robert Mugabe. But can he turn things around? Mercury rising as Europe bakes in the scorching heat. Temperatures are set to break all-time records. Make or break. The UK's Theresa May prepares for Brexit crunch talks with France's Emmanuel Macron with the tough task of winning him over. And do you own an iPhone? Well, if so, you've helped Apple hit $1 trillion in market value, the first U.S. company to do so. Now, the incumbent president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has won the country's presidential election, according to Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission. The results come amid a week of unrest in the capital, which saw government troops deployed to the streets and 6 people dead after opposition leader Nelson Chamisa accused the president's party of vote rigging. Well, with more insight on this, I'm joined by European Affairs correspondent Alistair Sanford. So, Alistair, we're looking at this victory. It's been after days of uncertainty and violence.
It's a narrow victory for Emmerson Mnangagwa. He won just under 51% of the vote. And in some ways, it feels a bit like a hollow victory. I mean, yes, he won at the first round. He beat off some 24 candidates. His party won a parliamentary landslide. At the same time, ahead of the announcement, as you say, the streets of Harare were empty. So different to the joyous scenes when Robert Mugabe was ousted from power last year. Why? Those terrible images of violence from Wednesday, the police crushing the opposition demonstrations, the deaths, the opposition headquarters stormed by police, the opposition, of course, who dispute the results of the election. It's not a good start for Mnangagwa. He's wanted to present a new image for the country, to forge a new path for Zimbabwe. And yet, what's the image that lingers? It's very much one of political repression. The suggestion is that whoever's president, who's really in power, it's the army.
Well, it is his first term as elected president. How do you think he's going to be viewed internationally, and what is expected from him?
It's a bit early for international reaction so far to the results. Beforehand, the foreign observers condemned the violence that we saw. Although Mnangagwa represents in some ways a break from Mugabe, he was his right-hand man. And was linked to some of the worst atrocities under his rule. Of course, he's had that long-term nickname of the crocodile. His reputation was formed when he was part of the struggle against white minority rule. It's claimed he was tortured then, and that formed a certain indifference on his part to violence. But when he was security chief, there were thousands of civilians massacred. Later, he was accused of masterminding attacks on the opposition. There have also been suggestions of corruption. He's always denied all that, and his supporters say he's much more pragmatic than Mugabe. He now talks about re-engagement, about democracy, about trying to form unity. But his critics say these are really just words, and what's needed now is international investment. He says he wants to encourage it. Zimbabwe's economy is in desperate straits and certainly needs it, but his record suggests that he's not a natural democrat.
All right, well, everybody watching what happens next, and thank you for that, Alistair Sanford. Now, earlier we saw how Europe's south has been hit by this feverish heat wave, and now let's move to its northernmost reaches, which are also experiencing some unprecedented weather events. Ice on the glacier-capped southern top of Kebnekaise mountain has melted so much this summer that it is no longer Sweden's highest point. It has lost 4 meters, making it only the second highest peak. Well, the mountain has become a symbol of climate change in Sweden, which has seen its hottest July on record and severe drought and some of the worst forest fires the country has ever seen. Let's go live now to Tarfala in northern Sweden, where we can join the researcher who made this discovery, Professor Gunhild Rockvist. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us today. What were your thoughts when you first realized that the mountain had lost 4 meters and is no longer the highest peak?
Well, because of the very warm weather, we sort of expected a lot of melt, but we were surprised. And also by the look of this little glacier, it looked very different, the looks I've never seen before. So we sort of expected it, but we were still astonished when we got the results, yes.
And how can events like this tell us about the wider implications of climate change? I mean, you are in a region where it's a hub for the study of glaciers.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the trend for many years now. This peak has melted a meter per year the past 20 years. And it's a symbol for all the glaciers in Sweden, in Norway, in the whole world, except Antarctica, so that's what we know so far. So it's really a symbol. but also for the whole mountain region. It's not just the snow and ice that melts, the whole ecosystems and the people that depend on those, the indigenous reindeer herding communities, they're really struggling at the moment.
Yeah, can you touch on that and elaborate a little bit? The people and the wildlife that have been affected as a result of this change in climate.
Yeah, I mean, snow and ice is important, but also the vegetation is changing. And actually also the winter climate is changing a lot. The conditions in the snow, which causes a lot of problems for the animals, the reindeers and the moose and so on. So we see lots of change. And so it's serious.
Yeah, no, we were talking about glaciers, but I also would like to bring to your attention of course, the wildfires that was also present in Sweden. So how does this all tie in together in the grand scheme of things?
Oh, I think people have been aware for a long time that climate change is here, but this summer the effects have been really very dramatic. So, and we have an election coming up, so I really think and hope that our politicians will take this seriously now and inspire people to change and get a better attitude towards this.
Yeah, okay, and just very briefly, we don't have much time, but looking ahead, do you think that this trend is going to continue from a scientific point of view?
I think so, but it's guessing, of course. I mean, you know, weather changes from year to year, but the trend has been clear for the past 20 years, and I do think it will continue. And also, you know, you start a melt cycle. It's just, it will continue, yes, I'm sure.
Right.
And we will be able to report later in the summer, yeah.
Indeed, and we'll go back to you for that then. Thank you very much, Professor Gunhild Rökvist. Thank you. Now let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo. An Ebola outbreak is causing widespread panic among the local population. Health workers on the ground are saying. Now, 4 people in the eastern town of Mangina have tested positive for the deadly virus. Some 1 million displaced people live in the frontier zone of the country. And the World Health Organization says that the geographical location of the outbreak increases the danger of spreading it.
It's an active conflict zone, and so we'll be doing public health operations really across the front lines in order to stop this outbreak. The other factor that's concerning is, of course, it's very close to borders, and particularly here the border with the country of Uganda.
Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Oliver Johnson, who has participated in the fight against Ebola in Africa and is co-author of A Doctor and a Diplomat on the Ebola Frontline, a book that recounts his experience. Well, Dr. Johnson, thanks for joining us on the program. So this, first of all, it has been declared over already and now it's back. So clearly it's a very complex situation to deal with. Can you tell us what has to be done next?
Yeah, so I think one of the things the World Health Organization has said, Dr. Tedros, the Director General, that Ebola is a constant threat. It lives in animal populations, and at any time it can transfer over to humans. So that's why we're seeing a second, totally separate outbreak going on in a different part of the country. And it's a reminder that this is going to be something we're going to see in the years ahead. And certainly from the West Africa outbreak a few years ago, which was by far the worst Ebola outbreak we've ever had, there were some really important lessons that we learned. And I think one of the most important, and we talk about this a lot in our book, Getting to Zero, is that you've got to work with communities and not just do a response to communities. People are scared. They're suspicious. This is unheard of and it's terrifying. And then all of a sudden, foreigners come in and government people come in, and you've got to win their trust. And I think that's going to be a particular challenge in an active conflict zone where trust may be in short supply.
Yeah, so this is a bit of bad news that the Ebola outbreak is back. But on the positive side, in recent years, we have seen progress in vaccines against Ebola. Is this likely to help this time?
So we do have a vaccine that was trialed very successfully in the West Africa outbreak. It was used more recently in the Congolese outbreak that ended recently, but we don't know that it works for all of the different strains of Ebola. We're still waiting to hear what strain it is that's causing the most recent outbreak declared recently. So I think we may have to look back to traditional techniques of controlling outbreaks. And the really important things there, they're going to be things like good leadership. And we're seeing that already. The government has come forward, has been open about this outbreak. They've declared it publicly. The World Health Organization is, very early on publicly taking ownership of the situation. But it's also a reminder to us that once an outbreak starts, it's almost already too late because the conditions on the ground have been set. The numbers of doctors and nurses that you've got to work with, the health infrastructure, is there running water in the hospitals? Are there gloves on the hospital wards? These are the things you need. And it's a reminder that we can't keep bouncing from one crisis to the next, but we've got to do the long, hard work of building strong health systems. And of course, the other thing to remember is that in an Ebola outbreak, it's not just Ebola you've got to worry about. You've still got kids with malaria who need treatment. You've still got a woman who's in obstructive labor who needs a midwife or who needs a cesarean section. So we can't forget that in the middle of this Ebola outbreak, we've got to keep providing healthcare to everybody else in that population.
All right. Thank you for your insight there, Dr. Oliver Johnson, who was participating in the fight against Ebola in Africa. Thanks. Now, enemy of the people. That's how President Donald Trump described the media. And the UN has said that this kind of language does put journalists in danger. And the White House press secretary, she's under fire for not having reversed this statement. Alex, tell us about this.
It's a war of words in a very literal sense. Let's just take you back to how it started this week and how it's come to fruition, you might say, in the last few days. This is Jim Acosta from CNN. We cannot show you the video he shared on his Twitter feed. It shows a lot of people swearing and shouting at him at a Trump rally in Tampa. He's saying he's very worried the hostility whipped up by Trump is going to be dangerous for journalists. Well, this suggestion that journalists are somehow the enemy of the people, a term Donald Trump has used in the past. Well, Ivanka Trump, his daughter, was asked whether she thought journalists were the enemy of the people. This is what Ivanka Trump had to say.
Do you think the media is the enemy of the people?
No, I do not.
That's not a view that's shared in your family.
Are you looking for me to elaborate?
Sure.
No, I don't.
Enemy of the people or not. So Ivanka Trump seeming to say, no, they're not the enemy of the people. But then the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, was confronted with this by Acosta, saying, come on, now you've got to say it. Ivanka Trump has said it, disown this comment. And when she was pushed on it, this is what took place.
It's ironic, Jim, that not only you and the media attack the president for his rhetoric when they frequently lower the level of conversation in this country. Repeatedly, the media resorts to personal attacks without any content other than to incite anger.
You did not say in the course of those remarks that you just made that the press is not the enemy of the people. For the sake of this room, the people who are in this room, this democracy, this country, all the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
I appreciate your passion. I share it. I've addressed this question. I've addressed my personal feelings. I'm here to speak on behalf of the president. He's made his comments clear.
Well, he made his comments clear about what his daughter had to say as well, saying what she meant was the media is not the enemy of the people, it's the fake news that's the enemy of the people. And then at a rally last night, Donald Trump had this to say about the media.
The president overstayed. So I was late and I overstayed, and honestly, folks, it was such a beautiful, beautiful visit and afternoon. But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
So in that comment, in a long rally, Donald Trump goes through a series of his achievements in his mind that he was not given the right press for. In that clip, he was referring to his visit to the UK, where he's accused of overstaying his welcome and being late for the Queen. Now, then he went on to say that key phrase, disgusting, disgusting fake news. And it's, I think, the strength of the words there that have had UN experts on freedom of expression concerned. And these are just some of the terms they've pulled out, the president has said they find worrying. Fake news, enemy of the American people, very dishonest, distorting democracy. Now, they say, these two experts say that what is taking place here is Donald Trump is undermining the basis of a free press. And this has gone global. The United Nations Rights Council here, organization, the European branch, tweeting to pick up on these remarks made about the global media. But here saying it's really important that journalists are protected and warning that if this violent rhetoric continues, well, it's only, it seems to be a potential that journalists could come to be harmed. So it is a heated war of words that now has gone global. UN experts picking up on this. But no doubt, Tessa, we're going to see a lot more of this as the US midterm elections approach.
For sure. Thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. And still to come for you on the program, decades of conflict in Iraq has left thousands of people injured. Well, Euronews went to see how one clinic is helping Iraqis with their rehabilitation. We'll be back after the break. Your top story on Good Morning Europe, Zimbabwe's new start. Emmerson Mnangagwa is elected president after 4 decades of rule by Robert Mugabe. Now in Iraq, decades of conflict have left thousands of people permanently disabled. For one clinic in Sulaymaniyah, helping with physical rehabilitation is just one part of the solution, as Euronews's Neil O'Reilly has been finding out.
Over 20 years, more than 5,000 people have received prosthetic limbs at the Emergency Rehabilitation Centre at Sulaymaniyah. The Italian NGO opened this facility in 1998 in Iraqi Kurdistan, next to the border with Iran, a heavily mined area, the legacy of the 1980s Iran-Iraq War and the Gulf War of 1991. Today, patients arrive from all over Iraq, Iran and Syria. More and more are coming to Mosul.
The most common cases are below knee amputees. We have few of them, they are upper limbs, and very few of them, they are hand cut. Major injuries, they are mines and explosions.
Just a few months after the end of the conflict in Mosul, there were over 4,800 amputees on the waiting list to receive prosthetic limbs. Nearly 200 have been treated so far. It's estimated that there are at least 1,000 unregistered cases. Patients get their self-sufficiency back, but not necessarily their livelihood. That's why the centre organises 2 sessions of vocational training per year. Ahmed has just finished his carpentry course.
I lost my leg to a mine, so I came here to learn a new job in order to provide for my family.
Ex-patients are trained in carpentry, PVC and leatherwork and tailoring. Groups of 15 are trained for 5 months and then given financial aid to start their businesses. More than 360 workshops have been opened so far. Gulistan dreams of opening hers.
I was 4 years old when I lost my leg. I was in the car and there was a car bomb. My dream was to be a tailor.
In Iraqi Kurdistan alone, over the past 25 years, there have been some 14,000 landmine incidents, resulting in at least 6,000 casualties.
Neil O'Reilly reporting there. And still to come for you on the program. Saved by the supermarket. The Cube team has a story on the unique way a supermarket in Finland is offering customers respite from the heat wave this weekend. But first, let's take a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back to the program. Now, as you know, Europe is going through a heat wave, and I can tell you we're talking about it here in the newsroom. And so the question is, how do you cope with it? Alex and the team have found a supermarket in Finland that has a unique way, right?
I'm just confused as how Tessa's still wearing a jacket. I'm sitting under the aircon vent, but there's a supermarket in Helsinki in Finland that's gone the next level, perhaps. It's inviting people to spend the night on the weekend sleeping in the supermarket, the air-conditioned supermarket, by the freezers. So you might be thinking of going to buy some goodies to stick in your freezer. Well, how about hanging around the freezers? The supermarket's post received thousands of likes, thousands of shares, and they then had to post to people saying, actually, too many people want to come. We can only take 100 and we're going to private message you. So that event got very popular. People did have some questions, it's worth saying. What did the health inspector have to say about it, this user said, Leo here. The supermarket saying the health inspector is fine with it. They're fine with people coming in. The supermarket even offering breakfast to some people staying there. So it's not just this one business in Helsinki. About 600 kilometres to the north as well, there is now a health spa offering people the chance to stay on the weekend, a smaller number, it must be said, with the opportunity to even do things like saunas. I can't think of anything worse than a heat wave, but there are air-conditioned rooms there. They'll have drinks, food and breakfast. So it seems to be a number of businesses welcoming people in to enjoy the night and to spend the night with them to cope with this heat wave. It's got a lot of you thinking creatively anyway. We've seen it on social media. So share with us your stories. How are you coping with the heat wave? I'm hiding under the air conditioning. You can let me know what you're doing using #TheCube.
We need to be more creative in coping with this heat wave. Thanks for that, Alex. And thank you for joining us in Good Morning Europe. Do stay with Euronews for all of your top stories. And because it's Friday, we're leaving you with no comment from Colorado, where a bear caused havoc in a car. Well, the bear was teased out of the station wagon by an officer using a rope on the door, but he did leave a trail of destruction inside.
Oh my gosh, a lot of damage. I will get him.